I'm Roger Wood. I'm speaking with Rochelle Jones, police detective in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and welcome to In-Depth NH.
Thank you very much for having me.
You were already regarded highly in Portsmouth, but a couple of weeks ago wasn't exactly a regular day at the office, was it?
No, it was not. I did not see that coming in, and thank you for saying that.
Well, what's it like going from, I don't know, 0 to 100 miles an hour when you expect to have a regular day at the desk?
Right. Well, that's funny. Regular, and normal are words that we don't really use in law enforcement over the years because you just never know what's going to happen. And that's also like one of the great things about it. But yeah, I definitely thought that I was just going to go in, and my plan for the day was to be on oral boards and just to interview new candidates. And so that's what I expected to do when I went into work. And then to be called to a situation like that was the first time in my career that that's happened. So,
well, anybody who doesn't know about it, and there are a few probably, that you did talk a person down from the I-95 bridge, 130 feet above water level, to come up safely. And you had just taken a course in that type of thing, didn't you? Just in time.
right. So, like I just joined, called the Seacoast Emergency Response Team. And that's also like our tactical, but most people would know the word as SWAT, right? So we have a regional SWAT team, but we also have a crisis negotiation team. And I just joined in March. There was an opening. And so there's actually a 40-hour FBI course that I still need to go to. So as a police officer, I'm very much a veteran, but as a negotiator, I'm very much a rookie. And normally in a call out situation, I'm still in the observation period where I probably wouldn't be the first person talking to somebody. But, every day in law enforcement, like these types of things happen, they usually develop, as in front of you. So it's not the first time I've had to talk somebody down per se in my career, but it's certainly the first time that I've been called. And the reason why I was called that day wasn't as a call out as a negotiator, but it was because there had been two main negotiators up there, but they believed that we may have some commonalities with this individual because he was from Portsmouth.
And you learned, well, you probably already learned this, to listen.
Right. So one of the things, that I did go to that you were referring to was there was a conference. So there's like a national New England conference for negotiators that we had just gone to with the team. And ironically, I'd said to my team leader that day, he dropped me off at home. And I said, well, I won't be talking to anybody for a while, but just kind of course, famous last words. Right. And one of the things that there was a doctor he's a psychologist, but he's also a negotiator from Texas. And one of the videos he had just showed us was one about an officer trying to talk a gentleman off the bridge. And unfortunately, that did not end well. But his point to that was to make sure that we're safe when we talk to somebody, because our instinct is this person actually jumped off the bridge. It was more of like a bypass bridge, but the officer lunged to try and catch them. And so his point to us was make sure that you have somebody holding on to you, because our instinct is to try and save that person. So that was an important thing that I had just kind of learned that actually helped out on the bridge that day.
I saw a photo of you. I think it was you leaning over.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all I saw, you leaning over.
Yeah. But like what you said about active listening. So when I was thinking about applying to the team, I spoke to a lot of people that had been on the team. Like my chief, for instance, was a negotiator for years, and some other officers, just to make sure that would be a good fit. Because, in addition to being the community outreach coordinator, I'm also a detective. And so I'm used to being called out to crime scenes, and that's something that happens, but also getting called out, and being available to do a job like negotiations is asked for a lot. We're usually called out sometimes more than the tactical because, there's an uptick in mental health, and a lot of times it doesn't involve weapons and people just need to talk. But the theme I kept hearing was active listening. And, I thought I like to talk, and so everybody knew I'd be good at that part. But listening, we think about active listening, and a lot of times when we're listening, we're really thinking about, what are we going to say next? Are we really hearing somebody. And so that was a theme. And so before I applied and went for my interview for the position, I had to interview like a job interview for that position. It's a very sought after and serious one. I actually took an online active listening course to make sure that I was a very good, because I kept hearing this theme. I'm like, I'm going to make sure. And it was really helpful because it just really talked about, obviously like listening to somebody, but paraphrasing and, not trying to say that you understand, but really trying to help them find a solution or come to some sort of basically, and you're negotiating the same way you would, certainly it was a much higher level, but the same way you
Mm.
would to get your kid into bed or to eat broccoli, there's always a negotiation
Or
going
maybe
on.
to get a hostage taker out of
Right.
the situation.
Exactly. So it's like you're really trying to find out what is their issue. How can you help them resolve that? Like, what can we do to help you resolve this? Because
Mm.
they're really the one holding all the cards. They know what's going on. And in this particular incident on the bridge, like, I didn't even know the person's name when I was asked to go up there. I had no idea, who he was until I met him. So, a lot of times in negotiation situation, you have a team. So you have
Mm.
like maybe 5 or 6 people. You have somebody, it's not face to face, like that's not that common, especially that bridge situation is why it was such a, even more of a big deal and stressful. But you usually have a team with you. You have somebody that's the primary that's listening and talking to the person. You have a coach that's next to you that's listening as well and helping you on what to say. You have somebody gathering intel information, saying things like, hey, they don't like their mom, stay away from that topic. Here they're happy about work. Like, there's a dry erase board where we're writing these things down. There's all these people with you. So to be up there and to not really have that, was you're trying to think of everything on your own. And, obviously there was other people there to help. The first thing I did was call my team leader on the way to the bridge and said, I want my team,
Yeah. Um, you went above and beyond, though, taking the person to the hospital.
Thank you. I think the community outreach portion comes into that as well, and as well as negotiations. Like a lot of times, you think about connecting with somebody and talking to them, and then what is the next step? Like usually, and that's one thing that I really, really hammered home when I was talking to him. I was like, listen, our conversation doesn't stop here. It's not a one and done. And I tell people that all the time, even when I'm doing safety trainings, if we come into contact with each other, I'm your police officer, like, please reach out to me, months, years down the line. And that happens. And I just really wanted him to know that, we weren't finished when he came up there, and let's make a plan together and see that through. And, obviously he was comfortable with me at that point. So I was not going to, just hand him off, to a stranger that he wasn't comfortable with talking to. And so and everybody was so great about it. And so, and I don't know him either. And I didn't feel completely comfortable driving by myself. And we didn't want to have to restrain him because he was being cooperative and he hadn't committed a crime. So it was nice, to have all of that team support, and just, we had that common understanding that this is not, something we're going to force. It's going to take about as long as it takes, until it gets to a point where we do have to try something different. But it was just so thankful that it worked out. And I think we were all shocked.
Well, when you're not on a bridge talking somebody off of it, you're maybe in the office, or maybe you're on a crime scene and doing other jobs. I mean, you're filling different shoes, aren't you?
Right. My job is, it was basically when it was created, I'm the first coordinator in Portsmouth, community outreach coordinator, but it was really based. We had an interim chief from Manchester, David Mara, for a short period of time. And he modeled it after a 28-person unit in Manchester. And so there'd be, 1 or 3 officers, for public housing as the liaisons. You'd have the school resource officers, you'd have, people that would teach like self-defense classes, and just kind of took all of that and put it into one person. So I do things like I follow up with, if we have a call of like an overdose, like I'll reach out to that person the next day and just say, can I get you help? I do mediation for housing authority. Like I go to schools and talk to kids. Like,
Yes.
a day for me can be anywhere from a civilian response active shooter training to, a cert call out to legal questions for housing authority. It's really being an encyclopedia and a resource for the department. And then creating, programs. Like I'm working with Senior Activity Center. They called me yesterday about, wanting to do a self-defense class for seniors. So we're going to work on how do we do that? What does that look
Mm.
like?
Mm.
So it's very fluid.
Yes. Well, when I asked you for maybe a list of your projects, it would go from my elbow to my wrist, all single spaced. It's a lot of.
Yeah, and and then that's building relationships for other officers too. So,
Mm,
we have a tour coming in, for preschoolers tomorrow. And so my job now is, my succession plan, because I have 20 years in the business, and I'm looking to retire at some point, and I'm also, unsolved homicide investigator. So that is a goal for me, like as far as talking to this, my friend on the bridge, it's like, okay, I don't need to ever do that again. Like,
right.
wow, but as far as like goals that I want to accomplish, like I really like to solve this double homicide. It was people that I knew growing up. So that's another responsibility. So it's a lot of responsibility, but it's also building those relationships for other officers, and that ripple effect.
It's not that great that you can solve something as a domestic violence issue, but these random killings of the past, really frustrating for those who were investigating at the time. And now you have some modern tools to look into it, don't you?
Right. And part of that is, like I said, these people were known to me, Bolton Moore. So JJ and Stella, I knew them. We grew up in the same neighborhood. I still live in the same neighborhood. So even some of the persons of interest are people that are familiar to me. And, the first thing that I did when I was assigned the case was to call one of the relatives and introduce myself, and actually met with her. She was the niece of Stella. And so we met and talked about things, and then my second thing that I did was, I went and met with the former investigators, because I always felt like, how would I feel if I was a law enforcement
Mm,
officer and I had a case, and then, retired? There must have been thoughts, there must have been things that are probably not in reports that might have missed. And I just wanted to give that respect, and
mm.
now it's just trying to find time. That's the hardest thing, is with all these other responsibilities that, the living take precedence. And my job is pretty much, I can have a plan for the day, but then I can be called to anything. So it's really just trying to make time a little by little, but that is certainly like a goal. I would love to at least get the case to a better place, ready for somebody else to pick up and run with. But I'd
Yeah.
really like to
And
resolve it.
neighbors, and people you knew as a child,
Right,
these
right.
people.
Yeah. And it's just something that it has to be. You just can't do that. Like, it's
Mm.
just, it's awful, and it sits in our hearts, so. And they were just really wonderful people. And sometimes you read things and go, I don't know who would do something like that, and you watch these shows, and or you find out something weird about a couple that was, they have some secret life or something. And it's not these, they're just consistently like just good people. They would give them their shirt off their back to anybody, and killing is never okay. But this was just so unnecessary and awful, so.
Reminds me of Concord recently.
Right, right. That just the trail that just happened. Yeah. So, it's baffling. And then you think like, okay, well, we have DNA and all these things, and DNA is great to show that somebody was present at a crime scene, but you still have to show the totality of the circumstances, especially if a suspect is known to a victim, then there's a reason for their DNA to be in their house. If they've been over before, that doesn't prove that they're the ones, who murdered them. So there's more to it, and it's sometimes easier to pick up a case and run with it when it's yours and it's fresh. To pick something up 30 years later can be a challenge, but it's one I'm up for. So.
Then there's the cases before that where the
Right.
perpetrator could be dead for all we know.
Right. And that's possible too. But at least, I think the not knowing is what hurts the worst for, victims. So it's like at least to know and to have some answers that you didn't have. And then, you're able to put some things to rest.
What about you? You have 20 years in the department, and some police officers retire and then do something else. Maybe it's related and maybe it's not. But I wonder if you have ambitions to become a chief or commissioner. Now, New York and Philadelphia have female commissioners or
Right.
police chiefs, and I believe Metro London does. And there must be a lot more. And you haven't really hit the glass ceiling, have you? Maybe there's no glass ceiling for you and you want to reach up and do that. I don't know.
Right. That gets brought up a lot. A lot of people always say that to me, like you should be, I think that's very sweet. And I think,
Hmm.
I had a really good supervisor recently. This position, there's so much freedom and so much power in a way because I can create programs and, there's a lot of things that I would lose with rank. So,
Mhm.
like I wouldn't be able to work this unsolved homicide case anymore. I wouldn't be able to, go out and see an issue and be able to change that or develop a program. There'd be a lot of things that I would lose. And I love, being right there in the midst of the community. It's the community that I grew up in. And so, that may shift. I did have opportunities for advancement and it wasn't right for me. Like my heart wasn't in it. My heart is still in the position that I'm in. And, but it's hard when you're in a ranking environment. And same thing, I was in the military as well, that, I look and there's friends that I went to the academy with that are chiefs now too. And it's, as much as I'd love to be the first, I'm a person of color as well, like, female chief of Portsmouth, like, I'd be just as happy to help somebody else whose dream that is to get to that position if they're the right person for the job. So, I don't know yet. I thought actually, if
Yeah.
you'd asked me 2 years ago, I thought I would have been retiring this year. And then I joined the, crisis negotiation team. And there's something to be said for joining things like those type of teams when you're 20 years into the job and you have all of this institutional knowledge that can help, when you're talking to somebody on a bridge like that's, I mean, I guess anybody could do that as well. But sometimes you have all these resources, like things like going to get an evaluation, just there was somebody from the community that I reached out to and called while I was up there, talking to him, that was great. And I'm like, hey, I need to know, who sits on this board. Like there was some questions and, people that he wanted to meet and talk to that I was able to connect with, because of my relationship with the community. And that was huge, So we'll see. We don't know. I might play softball. I love playing softball as well. So I'm an umpire now and I coach. And so that's my other passion. So we shall see what happens.
Well, you're very young, really, to have 20 years in, and you have a lot of years where you can search for your ultimate goal, right? I mean, you don't have
Right.
to find it right now.
Yeah, well, I started in corrections. I joined the military when I was 19. And so I was military police officer. I worked at Leavenworth Prison, so I did that for 2 years.
Mm.
And then I worked at Stratford County Department of Corrections for 3 years as a correctional officer. And I also worked in the Chase Home for Children as a residential counselor. So that I think those were so good to do before becoming a police officer because you learn how to talk to people and you don't have weapons, so, and you're around people all the time, and it was just a really good experience. Not a path that I would have chosen for myself. I wanted to be a hip hop dancer growing up and I, I got into a fight. I did. I was going to be J-Lo. I'm dead serious.
Yeah, I
I
believe it.
know. Yeah, police officer was not on the radar. And I got into a fight, downtown when I was 17. I used to run away a lot. I had some problems at home and, and I almost was arrested and I met police officers and I watched how they did their job. And then it was something that interested me. And those officers at the time kept an eye on me and, kind of pushed me to do something better with myself. And that's what I ended up doing. So, and I love being able to do that for children and to be able to see like a troubled, or an at-risk youth and say, I was in your shoes. Like, you can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be a police officer and, just find one that you can trust. But how do we get you to where you need to be, and it's an amazing position to be able to do that.
I'm going to wrap up soon, but here's a curveball for you. And maybe you can focus on this area because different areas of the country have different aspects regarding the police. Do you think in general, people like police, respect police, or fear police?
Right. I think it's somewhere in the middle. And I really think that it depends on their experience that they've had. And if they've had no experience, then it really depends on what they've seen on TV or in movies or their interpretation. And I taught like a safety class the other day, and I actually, was to advocates, part of a steering committee for victim advocates. And, I said, who has had a bad experience with the police? And a lot of people raise their hand. I raised my hand. I've had a bad experience with police officers, like, before I was one and even while I was one. And, I think that even if somebody's had a bad experience is an opportunity for us to make it a better one. So, I think anytime that somebody has authority over you or can take away your freedom, I think that's scary. And, I think that anybody would have some sort of apprehension with the police officer, and if they didn't, then, I don't think that that would be normal, but I think it's very much our responsibility to be transparent. The majority is our responsibility to be transparent and to build those relationships, and I think people every day that come up and give us another opportunity to do that. So I really think it's somewhere in the middle.
Is it still a good job to get into when you're young and considering a career? Is it still worthwhile?
I think so. We have so many well-rounded officers. We have so many educated officers. Like our department is very, it's very diverse in that sense. You have some people that were school teachers, some people that were social workers. You have some people with master's degrees. You have lawyers. Like, it's very diverse. And I just think that a department has to do their best to reflect and look like their community. So if our community is like 50% women, then we should really try and have like that percentage. Our department should be reflective of our community, and but there's a lot of work to be done. I think it's still a great job to get into. It's tough when you're newer. Like right now, I can still be called out at 2 a.m, but for the most part, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. with weekends off, right? But technically, like, you kind of earn your way to that point, but when I first started for, probably 10 years, I worked midnight shift a lot, but I enjoyed that too. There was a time when you worked midnight shift and people weren't around like in the morning, and now it's like, I don't know when people work because people are around all the time. You used to not have to wait in line at the grocery store, but I think it is because I think that, it's one of the few jobs where you can actually, be the difference that you want to see. There's certainly people come up to you and just say like, I don't know if you remember me, but this happened to me when I was, 10 years old and you were there and you helped me, or I want to be a police officer because of you. It's the ultimate compliment.
Sure. More than anybody, I think you know every nook and cranny in the city. You must.
I think, it keeps changing though, right? So like I
does.
have to so often go downtown and be like, what is this restaurant? But a really funny thing is I think it's funny to me, when I first started on Portsmouth as a patrol officer, I failed location training during my field training because I didn't know the street names of anything. Like if they had said it's by the old bread and butter, I would know where that was, but I didn't know like where's Panaway Manor? I'm like, I don't know, that's where Tom's house is. I never paid attention to, I never paid attention to streets.
Yeah.
So just kind of funny, but yeah, I certainly do. I love this city. So I would not want to be an officer anywhere else. No offense to anyone, but I think you're more passionate about it. It's nice to give back. There was a lot of people that helped me, mentored me, guided me, and I love helping people. And that's what, everybody usually says when they get into this job. And it's just something that you can't forget.
Great interview. Great.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. I think people will get a lot out of it, not only from this state, but from other states. They listen and, well, I mean, these things go all over the world, really.
Right. Yeah.
So I'll circle back and let you know about things. Okay.
Okay. I really appreciate it, Raj. Thanks for all you do. It's like an honor to talk to you because like I said, I always at 98.1 in the morning on the way to work and everything. So I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're in the podcast game too.
Yeah. Thank you, Rochelle. See you again.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.